come back to it in the future. We usually give this class over 6 hours. It's hands-on. The students get to do some, real project planning. We're squishing it into an hour and a half, and then if you guys have questions, we can, catch up later. But today, inshallah, you just learned the basics of project management. What's a project, and what are the things you want to be doing to, kick off a project? And I know all of you will be working on different types of projects, so this, inshallah, will come very handy for what you're doing, inshallah. All right, so like I said, we're taking the 3 hours. It's usually a 6-hour class, 3 hours of lecture embedded with activities. 3 hours of activities is like 15 minutes each throughout the 6 hours. But we'll squish it to an hour and a half, and then give you an opportunity to work on a project where you plan out a youth career fair. So we're gonna give you a hypothetical project. Today is January 19th, and you are required to do a youth fair by May 30th, 2021. And with some of the things that you've learned, inshallah, you guys can put this together, all right? And then you get an opportunity throughout your internship, for 12 or 24 weeks, or some of you stay for a year, to kind of practice that and be even stronger and better at it. If you have questions at any point, just raise your hand, ask questions. At the conclusion of this, you'll get a certificate that looks similar to this. It's got your name, the date, what you attended. This class is called YPM101, and you get, I think, one ILIA education unit, which is 8 hours of learning. So how to benefit from this hour and a half? Want to take notes. So I would encourage you to fire up a Google Doc. You can share it with me. But capture notes as I'm speaking. If you got questions, you can capture there as well, and you can ask them at the right time. But it would be a good reference point for you. So just take a second, go to Google Docs, open an empty blank document. Try to keep your phone away so you don't have distractions. If you have 2 screens, that's best. Then you can type on one and look at the slides on the other one. If you don't, not a big deal. You can, switch back and forth between 2 tabs. Or you can also connect on your phone if you want, but that might not be very convenient. Okay, we will do some team activities throughout the hour and a half. And like I said, you can apply these concepts later tonight when you work on your projects, inshallah. We call this experiential learning. That's a relatively new approach in teaching and learning. At school, you learn through direct interaction with your teacher. There's very little experience in it. Experiential learning is the way the Prophet ﷺ and other prophets used to teach their followers through experience, like the story of Musa alayhi salam with Al-Khidr. He learned through experience. So that's the approach that we take at ILIA. We find it's more effective, more engaging, inshallah. All right, so what are we gonna learn? We're gonna talk about what is a project, what's project management. You learn about a couple of useful tools. I'm going to be going back and forth between 2 or 3 presentations. We offer this also over 3 days, 27 hours. It's pretty a lot, but I'll focus on some key slides. So don't feel too confused if you see me switching screens or presentations, but you can take screenshots, and put it in your Google Doc. And this way, by the end of the hour and a half, you have a nice, handout kind of focused on everything we talked about, okay? And we'll talk about some high-level principles and concepts when it comes to managing work and projects. All right, so let's start by talking about vision. What is vision? So if you want to drop it off in the chat, tell me what does vision mean to you when someone says, what's your vision for the next year? What does that mean? What comes to mind? You can put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and speak up. What you're working towards, okay. What you'd like to accomplish, yeah, that's great. Your goal, okay. Any other thoughts? Where you see yourself or your goals, exactly. So it's a snapshot of the future. Think of it like this guy here, cameraman. You got a camera in your hand and you're taking a picture of the future, right? Your vision could be for 6 months, it could be for a year, it could be for a week, it could be for whatever period of time you envision, right? So when you're working on a project, one of the first things you want to do is think of the future. What is the project going to look like at some point in the future? So let's take a hypothetical example. Let's say you were assigned a project to launch a chapter. Actually, who here is from Houston? Raise your hand if you're, okay, just Tuba? All right, cool. I'm actually in Houston right now in full shear. Beautiful weather down here. If you guys are up in Virginia and Maryland, you're missing out. But we're looking to start a chapter in Houston, possibly because we have a few people who've been doing things with us, and we feel there's some opportunity down here. So anyway, let's say you have you're given a task to start a chapter in Houston, right? So one of the things you want to start before you even do any planning is envision what that chapter is going to look like. Like, is it going to be in a attached to a masjid? Is it going to be in a shopping area? Is it going to be next to a high school, or some other area? Is it going to be in a city or a suburb or an urban area, a rural area? That's kind of vision. And then the day you open, like, how many people do you envision being at the opening ceremony? Is it going to be 20 or 200? What's the opening ceremony going to look like? Is it going to be in a hotel or in the actual location? Right. So vision is basically a snapshot of the future. And we can have visions for our goals, like you said. It's a little bit different than a goal, slightly different. It's a very high level goal, if you will, right? Goals tend to be a little more defined and specific, as we'll talk later. There's something we call SMART goals. You might want to write that down, SMART, S-M-A-R-T, which stands for specific, measurable, achievable or attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And we'll talk more about that in detail. But a vision might not be necessarily specific. It might not be very measurable. It could just be a higher level vision. Like, hey, we envision in 6 months we're going to have a chapter in Houston. But what does it look like? We don't really know the details. But we know we're going to have a chapter, and we expect the vision is 15 people will come in every day, something like that. All right, so that's a quick thing on vision. We want to talk about mission, right? So when someone tells you what's your mission in life, what does that mean to you? Let's put that in the chat as well. A consistent kind of goal, okay. Any other thoughts? Your ultimate goal, where you want to end up, okay. Great, these are good ideas. So it's the purpose you're living for, right? It's the purpose. So it's a little different than the vision. The vision is kind of like your end picture. The mission is what gets you up every morning. Why do you get up and do whatever you're doing, right? It's the fuel or the purpose that you have in life. So for example, one person, their mission could be to promote awareness amongst elders about health concerns, and hence they decide to go to med school and specialize in medicine for elders, people over 60. Another person, their mission could be improve human health through practice and exercise. So that person goes to college and studies what do they call it? Kinetics, and they become a coach, an athlete coach, and work at a high school, for example. Or someone whose mission is to mitigate human suffering through medicine. So their mission is to help people not be in pain. So they go to med school and they study pain management, or they become a surgeon or a neurologist, for example, right? Someone's mission could be to empower the younger generation, so they become a teacher. So the mission is your purpose, basically your purpose in life. And of course, as Muslims, our mission is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and gain his pleasure, so we can go to Jannah. And we strive to achieve that through doing productive and beneficial things in life that please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So what you want to do is make sure your dunya and akhirah missions are both aligned, right? When it comes to a project, the project also has a purpose. We have a reason we're doing the project. So mission is a little different than vision. Vision is the end point. What is the project going to look like when it's all done and completed? the mission is why are you doing the project, okay? So mission is kind of like why. Why are you a teacher? Why are you an engineer? Why are you an accountant? Why are you an athlete? You know, and the answer to that is your mission. I believe in my mission is to, and you fill in the blanks, okay? So those are two important things to keep in mind when you take on a project. You always want to ask the person giving you the project, which is usually the sponsor, the person, you know, funding that project or asking about it. He's like, why are we doing this? Why are we, you know, taking place in this, spending time and effort on this project? What are your projects that you're working on? Let's go around. All right, awesome. So you want to ask yourself the question, like, why am I working on Ilyas Jerhol's case? Why is that important, right? Why am I working on misconceptions about Islam, and why am I working on a halaqah, right? That's important to know. And then the next question you ask yourself, what's the vision when this project is done? What is that halaqah going to look like? What is it about? Where is it going to be offered? Is it online or in person? Who's coming to it? What's the demographics, the age, you know, those kinds of questions. Same thing for Talia. What is the vision here would be, what is the final product going to look like? Is it a paper, a 6-page paper, or is it a video? If there's a video, is it going to have like 100 views in the first 24 hours? Or what's your vision? Because that's going to help you define what your project is. All right. A little background about myself. I started Ilya in 2009. I'm originally an engineer, electrical engineer, did a lot of work in network design and communications, building the internet back, mobile internet back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Worked with a bunch of technology companies and then got involved in project management, software development. In 2009, started Ilya to kind of, you know, empower the young Muslim generation through leadership development and training, and, you know, been doing project management training, and I also do project management as another job for different industries, healthcare and others. All right, so we kind of went through that. I don't know if we'll do Kahoots. We might not have time. We'll try to do other hands-on activities, but I think we're done. All right, so let's talk about projects, some traits of projects and the cornerstones of projects. We're going to talk about, you know, what are some of the qualities of projects. Assalamu alaikum, Abdul Latif. I see you just joined. All right, awesome. So Abdul Latif went through this, so you should, this should be fresh in your mind, inshallah. All right, so how do you define a project? When someone tells you you're going to be working on a project to free Ilyas Jerhold, what does that mean to you? So how do you define a project? What are some of the things that come to mind when a person tells you you know, this is a project? Or what makes a project different than other types of work? And Abdul, let's see if you can jump in. Don't feel, because you took this class before, you know, you're not allowed to answer. And Yusuf, are you back? A team working towards a common goal. Absolutely. Okay, that's great. All right, so let's say you walk into a bank, right? There's going to be a team of people there. There's going to be a bunch of tellers. There's going to be a branch manager, a couple of associates, maybe a customer service rep standing at the door asking you how they can help you. So that's the team, and they're working also towards a common goal, which is to help people, you know, save their money and have financial products and whatnot. But that's not really a project, right? Is working at a bank a project? It's not. It's an operation. The teller does the exact same thing every day, right? So the teller comes into the bank at 9 o'clock in the morning. They leave at 3 p.m. and he or she does the exact same thing. A customer walks up to them, they take their money, they count it, they put it in the machine, they give them a deposit slip, and they say, thank you very much. Or they take a check, they deposit it, cash it, or do something with it, right? Or someone comes with a request for withdrawal, they withdraw some money, they give them the cash, and off they are to their whatever they're doing. So that's an operation, right? It's not really a project, but yet it does have a team and they're working towards a common goal. So although that is what a project also does, yes, but it doesn't define a project. So a thought being executed. Yeah, it's a thought. That's a great, great thought. It is a thought and it's a unique thought. So a project is something that's a unique piece of work, all right? Usually it starts with an idea, exactly like a thought. And it's usually something that we haven't done before. That's why it's unique. All right. So how do we define a project? First thing, it's there to develop a unique service or product. That's number one. Number two, it's embarking on some work that has not been done before. So we don't really know what the outcomes could look like. Like there's a lot of ambiguity about it, a lot of risk, a lot of questions. And number three, it has a start and end date, right? When you go to McDonald's, they do the same stuff every day and they do it the whole day, right? You're not going to go, and find that McDonald's starts just for 2 months or for 2 years. No, the intention they have is to start working for good, right? So these are operations, things that are continuous, perpetual, they're operations. But things that are time bound, they're projects, right? So three things that characterize a project that makes a project a project. Number one, it has start and end dates. It's a temporary piece of work. Number two, it attempts to develop something that's unique, a unique product or service. Number three, it involves work that hasn't been done before, right? It's a new thing. And as a result, as you'll see in a little bit, there's some characteristics for projects. All right, so anyone has any questions on that? So if the work you're doing is something that does not typically get repeated every single day in different places, then it is a project. Projects happen in all forms and shapes. At the lower bottom of the screen, you see a big building there. That's a new museum in I believe, Qatar, in the Middle East. That's a project. You can see how unique it is. It's a very unique building, right? The shoe above it, it's a new product that Nike came out with recently. It's made from 100% recycled plastic bottles of water. They take the debris, the wasted or the recycled bottles, and they shred them and they make these shoes out of them. So it's a new product. It's novel. It's new. They haven't done this before. Now, once the shoe is designed and they do the first 50 pieces or 50, 100 prototypes, whatever, they test them out in the lab. They give them to some volunteers to walk in them, run in them for a couple of weeks. They test them out. And now they say, all right, this shoe actually meets our design specs and our expectations, and we think it's a good product. Now they're going to go ahead and mass produce it. It's no longer a project. So that shoe moved from a design, a project phase to a production phase. And the project team basically would go sit down with the people in the factory and tell them, all right, this is how we designed the shoe. This is how it should be done. And here are all the documents, and you're off to your production line. You can start making these shoes in the hundreds and the thousands and start selling them worldwide. Above that, you see a picture of a lady at a food bank. She's distributing food bags or something like that for COVID. The first time this nonprofit does this type of work, it's going to be a project, right? Or if they're doing it just for 3 months during COVID, it's a project. But once they put down a document called a run book or an operational manual, and they say, all right, we've done this for 2-3 weeks now. We know how to do it. Here's the guide. And they go off and bring 10 new volunteers and say, here's a guide, go do this food drive or a soup kitchen, whatever it is. Again, now becomes an operation, right? So projects can be in different forms. You see a drone at the top. That's an example of a technology project. There's a high-speed train underneath that, I believe in Japan. That's another project. At the very lower corner there, you see video games. Developing a new video game is a project. But once it's out on the market and people are using it, it's not a project anymore. It's just, a product that people are using. So you got some examples of projects here: building a school, upgrading IT computer system, field trip, workshops, things like that. All right, so some common characteristics of projects, things that are common across any project on the globe, regardless how big or small it is. First one, we got the answers here, but like one of you said, it's a team. There's got to be a team of people. So if you're a project manager, you can't be working by yourself on your project. There's got to be people with you, all right? And you got to start scratching your head and saying, who are my team members? If you're interning with us, your team members are basically the 25 other people, not every single one of them, but a handful, 7 or 8 are your core team, and then there might be another 7 or 8 who are people who are going to kind of support you here and there. So you got to know who your team members are, and we'll show you a template where you can capture that information. Projects have limited resources. So if you're working on a halaqah, for example, your resources here are time, right? And the technology you're going to use for that halaqah, if it's online, like the Zoom or whatever. So you can't have a halaqah that's 12 hours long because you might have other programs that need to use Zoom, right? Plus people wouldn't want to stay that long anyway. But the point is there are limited resources. And because projects are things that are new, there are some risks to it. Developing a halaqah is not really a project per definition, because we've been doing halaqahs for 12 years and we know how to do halaqahs very well. But it could be a new type of halaqah, right? It could be a new instructor, a new type of content, a new demographics, new people attending, or a new way of doing it. Instead of doing it in person with pizza and drinks and whatnot, now we're doing it online and we're trying to be creative. So that could make it a project. So you can have something that is very common, like an iPhone. We all have a phone. But now the company that's doing the phone wants to upgrade it to a better model that has more features. That qualifies it to be a project, all right? But because projects are new things, they have risks because you haven't done it before. We don't know what we're gonna come across. So if I'm doing a halaqah for the first time online, I'm trying to excite 9 and 12-year-olds, keep them alert and happy during that halaqah. There's some risk because I don't know really how they're gonna respond to the program that we're putting together. The last thing is that a project requires planning. It requires people to talk to each other. And once you have your plan, it's going to require that you match your plan to see how close or far you are from that plan. So yes, I am sharing a screen. Do you all see the screen? Okay. Yeah, Yusuf, you really need to be on a computer. Phones are not designed for things like this. But if you scroll your phone to the left or right, you will probably see this slide somewhere. All right, so let me ask you guys a question here. What does a plan mean to you? Just in one word. When someone says, "Hey, I got a plan how to plant 4 trees in front of our house," what does that mean? An idea, okay. All right, let's a method. Yep. A proposal. Okay, great. These are all great answers. So it's all the above. All right. The best word I would use for a plan is a map. Right? A map tells you the method, the steps to get to where you want to go. So if you say, I have a plan on how we can spend the weekend, it means you've got a good idea with some really good detailed steps of how to spend your weekend. Or if you say, I have a plan on how to grow 4 trees in front of the house, that means I have steps. What do I need to do? I need to go to the store, buy some soil, buy some shovels, buy some mulch, get the trees. I have steps on how to store the trees. I have some procedures, how to plant them, how to water them. I have basically a full map to make sure that my tree planting is successful. And after 2-3 weeks, the trees are still alive, they're blooming, they're getting stronger. All right. So the word I would use is a map. And that map includes your idea. It includes your methods and approaches and steps and activities. We call them activities and work items. And it also includes your proposal is kind of like your plan, right? Your suggested action items to perform. All right, so let's switch gear a little bit and talk about management in general. Right? So project management, they're 2 words, project and management, managing projects, right? But management is a discipline that's been around for quite a bit longer than project management. So in the Western world, management has been around for probably about, I'd say, 150 years or so. Project management has been around for about 40 to 60 years. So they were both relatively new fields compared to other things like engineering or chemistry or physics. But management, we'll talk about 4 things, 4 cornerstones. The first one is planning. Second one is organizing. Third one is directing, and then control. All right. So these are 4 cornerstones that comprise management. It doesn't matter if you're managing a hospital, a store, you're managing a house, you're managing a school. Any manager or leader would be doing these 4 things. And then depending on which domain they're managing, they might do additional things. So if you're managing a project, you'll do these 4 things, plus a couple more things that we'll talk about a bit later. But real quick, we're not going to spend much time on this. We'll jump into what these 4 things are. So first one, planning. Planning is kind of like studying the future. Like Tuba said, it's a proposal of what's about to happen in the future. So some output of planning are the things we talked about earlier, like a mission statement, right? So if you sit back and you think about your future and it's like, what excites me? What do I want to do in my life? Okay, I want to be a teacher or a chemist, or I want to be a biologist, or, you know, I want to work on cars. You're coming up with a picture of the future, which is your vision. And then you ask yourself the question, okay, why do I want to do this? Because there's a reason. You're passionate about it, right? You like cars because you feel they're cool, or you want people to move from point A to point B easily, or whatever it is. So that's your mission. That mission statement is part of your plan. It's part of your map. Goals, like you guys said earlier, things that you're trying to achieve. Objectives. Objectives are the same as goals. They're just a little bit more broader. Okay. So for example, you could say the objective of the halaqah is to teach middle schoolers good manners. All right. But then the goals would be more specific. Each halaqah shall teach 2 manners using 4 examples. So now you're specific and you're measurable. You're specific that you're teaching through examples, and you mentioned that you're going to teach them 2 traits using 4 examples. So something measurable. So objectives are broader, but goals are more specific, and goals are measurable. Like we said, they should be SMART goals. All right. So objectives are, think of them as high-level goals. Then we talked about the vision, and there's something called a charter. So a charter is kind of an approval that you as the project manager can go ahead and start your project. All right. And we'll talk about charters in a bit, show you guys how to come up with one, inshallah. All right. Organizing has to do with being able to repeat your work easily without spending too much churn. So for example, every time you join Zoom, you know, you don't want to be doing so many steps, just like the very first time ever you used Zoom and you were trying to figure out how to use it, right? The first time, it's okay to spend some time to figure out, how do I use this software? But once you figure that out, you want to be able to get from that point on, moving on. You don't want to start from 0 again every time. So organizing is about being able to repeat things efficiently. It's about coming up with procedures and processes and designs and architectures and things like that. So an architecture, just like that masjid or structure you see on the picture there, architecture is basically the structure of something, of a system of things, and how they're connected to each other. So if I say, what's an architecture of a car? What would come to mind? So when you say architecture of a car, what comes to mind, there's a moving part, the engine, and it moves another set of moving parts, the wheels. There's a transmission between, and there's a compartment where people sit. Like that's the basic architecture of any car, right? An engine, transmission, wheels, and a compartment. Now, those are the components, but then the next piece of the architecture is how are they connected? So they're connected through a chassis, you know, a piece of metal that connects them all. So architecture is components plus what connects them together. The way we piece things together and create the whole, exactly. That's a perfect definition. It's how you unify these components together. So having an architecture for something makes you an organized person, right? Whether it's your room, the architecture of your room, for example, at home is what? Is a bed, maybe a nightstand, and a closet. That's, most rooms would have these 3 things, right? Then some rooms might have curtains, other rooms might have blinds, some rooms might have carpet, others would have flooring. It doesn't matter, but that's your architecture. And what pulls this whole room together is 4 walls and a floor. All right. Next thing is a design. How do you design your room? So now the architecture says what? It says that there's a bed, there's a nightstand, and there's a closet. But it doesn't say how are they positioned. The design tells you how they're positioned, that the bed is on this corner, the nightstand is next to it, and the closet is across from it, right? But a different design could be the closet next to the nightstand. So you're taking the architecture and you're making multiple designs out of it. That's another way of being organized, right? Your stuff is not just all over the place. Standards, coming up with a standard way. So if all room doors are the same exact size, that makes it easy for you to go to the store and buy a door knowing that it's going to fit in your home, right? Or if all phone chargers are using the same interface, it makes it easy on everyone. So same thing, you want to, as a manager, be organized. What does that mean? It means the way you take notes on your meetings, you want it to be the same way every time. Why? Because it's going to be easy for your team members. If one day you're taking notes on a Google Doc, the next day you're taking notes on a spreadsheet, third day on a Google Doc that looks different than day one, your team will start to get confused. So you want to have a standard way of taking notes, a standard way of reporting your progress, a standard way of raising issues and so on, so that it's easy for people. All right, so these are 3 important things. If you can do these 3 things, you can have repeatable processes. Your projects can be modular, meaning they're, you can fit different things into it and out of it. If one piece of your project fails, the rest of the project could still be successful and not the whole thing would fail. All right, so that's about organizing. Directing. Directing is telling your team what needs to be done. It's aligning them to your vision and mission. Remember what we said about vision and mission? So when you direct your team, you're basically telling them, this is the goal of our project, guys, and this is why we're trying to do it. And you're keeping them motivated and aligned to what you're trying to do. You might need to negotiate with them. Sometimes you want to motivate them. Some people won't understand what you're saying. You want to communicate to them a lot. If there's anything that a project manager does, it's communicating. All right. Good project management is 50% talking to other people, explaining to them tasks, telling them what has to be done, checking on what was needed to be done, making sure it's been done, updating documents, updating spreadsheets, and things like that. Okay, so that's what directing is all about, is keeping that focus and aligning the team. The last thing that a manager does anywhere is to control things. What is controlling? It's looking at actual results and comparing them to your map, to your plan, right? So if your plan said on January 19th, we're going to have a class, you want to go on January 19th in the morning and say, all right, are we ready for the class? Yes, we're ready. Okay, then we're matching our plan. You come at the night and you say, did we do the class? And if the answer is yes, okay, then we achieved our plan. If the answer is no, that means you deviated from your plan a little bit and you need to go back and figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. So controlling is to measure actual results. Measuring it could be through asking questions, through surveys, whatever it is that your project is doing. And you compare these measurements to your baseline, which is your project plan. Baseline is your standard, your reference point. You could have limits, meaning if something is late a day or 2, you will still consider it green. But if it's late 3 days, you're going to say, guys, we're in the yellow now. If it's late 4 days, then it's in the red. You can define those limits with your team. But remember, limits are so important because we'll talk about them later when we talk about KPIs. All right, so I'm going to stop here, see if there are any questions. Okay, so let's go back to our little discussion here. We're going to touch on a few key concepts and then we'll jump into our project plan for the job fair. All right, so we got another, 40 minutes or so? We'll spend it mostly on the job fair. All right, I'm going to skip some of these slides. I'll talk about this slide, work items. Okay. If there's any questions, let me know. If you're not speaking, if you can go on mute, that would help. All right, cool. So work items. I want you guys to remember this term that's on the far left. Work items is basically a piece of work that needs to get done. Think of it as an item on your to-do list, right? So you wake up in the morning and you're kind of not sure what you want to do yet. So you bring out a piece of paper or your phone and you start jotting down things. You say, okay, I'm going to go jogging for a little bit. I'll feed the cat. I'll talk to my friend. I'll wash the car. I'll hang out with my mom, for example, right? So these are just to-do list items. We call these work items. Now, when you start to put an element of time to it, like a start and end date, it becomes an activity. So now if you say, all right, I'm going to feed the cat at 10 o'clock and I'll play with the cat for 10 minutes, 10 to 10, 10 or 10:15, now it becomes an activity. There's action. Okay, so think of it this way. Work items are nouns and activities are more actions, right? Then these activities result or yield some results. And these results yield some outcomes, and these outcomes could have some impact, okay? So for example, let's say you're gonna hang out with your mom. So now that's just a to-do item. You're gonna turn into activity by saying, I'm gonna go with her to visit our aunt from 5 to 7. So the result is what? Is a visit. The outcome is your aunt is happy, and the impact is we have a bigger, stronger family. Okay, so that's kind of how things work with projects. Same thing. So your project could have a work item. Let's take the example of helping free someone from jail, right? So there's going to be a work item that says call person's sister, all right? But it doesn't say when. And then we say, all right, we're going to call that person on January 21st at 9 o'clock. So now it's an activity. That's going to take that call 20 minutes. So from 9 to 9:20, that's the activity. And the result is a phone call with some notes. You're going to take some notes while you're talking to the person. The outcome is now with these notes, I become more informed and I can take on a next step. For example, I can talk to 5 people at Ilya to help me put a campaign about this new piece of information that I learned about. So the outcome here is kicking off a campaign. And the impact could be, 100 more people outside of the organization know about Ilyas and his problem, okay? So when you come up with these work items, you're thinking strategically. You're asking yourself, why am I doing what am I doing? Or what needs to happen to accomplish the next thing? And then also you're strategically thinking towards the end, meaning, okay, now we got this impact. What benefit has happened, or how has the world changed? As we mentioned earlier, goals should be SMART, meaning they're specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. You can take that same SMART concept and apply it to your results. So when you say, I'm going to hang out with mom, what does that really mean? Like, to be specific, it means, okay, where? Like, are we going to the park, or are we going to visit, my grandmother, for example? So now you're adding specificity. But if you just say I'm hanging out with my mom, I mean, sure, that could be 10 different things you're doing, right? And then it's measurable, meaning there's a start and end time. Maybe there's a date, that kind of thing. It's attainable, meaning it's something I can actually do. We can physically go get in a car and go visit that person or hang out. But if there's COVID, maybe it's not attainable. We can't go to the mall because the mall is closed, for example. And it's relevant. This task or this activity is relevant to what we're trying to accomplish, right? We're just not doing stuff that's not important. And it's time bound, meaning it has a start and end date. Okay, so screenshot this because this is going to be helpful to you in your projects. You're going to always want to ask yourself, okay, what's the activity? What are the results I expect? And what do these results need to look like, which is your outcomes? And that would help you make sure your projects are impactful and really good, smart projects. I'll also send you these slides, so if you can't screenshot it, don't worry. So activities are related to being active. It has some unit time. It has some, amount of time allocated to it. So always ask yourself, how much time would it take? And it has a purpose, okay? So let's fast forward a bit here. We're going to talk about something called a milestone. It's a significant event in a project. So for example, I was working with Zafar last night on a project to start a program called Empower One Jumpstart. And we in 20 minutes, put the whole project plan together, created the folder for it, a bunch of things. And we defined 4 milestones. So first milestone was to raise some money for that project. Second milestone was to hire 2 people. The third milestone was to update our curriculum. And the fourth milestone was to recruit the students for the program. So milestones are significant events. It's usually a major accomplishment or a major deliverable. Okay, so let's see here. Let's take an example where you guys can pitch in. Let's take a school field trip. Let's say you are a project manager for taking 200 fourth graders to Washington, D.C. What are some milestones for this type of project? Let's all put something in the chat here. A milestone that comes to mind. Any thoughts? Fundraising, okay. Yeah, maybe you need to raise some money in order to, be able to get there. So once you accomplish that goal, you raise the money, that's a big milestone, right? The actual fundraising activities, like, sending out letters or emails, or these are not milestones. They're just activities or tasks, but the milestone is raising that money. Sending out an announcement. Yep. So you raised the money, you've done your planning, you're sending out that email, that kicks off your outreach. That's another great milestone. Getting transportation, absolutely. So now you have a contract with a bus company and you've achieved another thing. All the activities have been planned, right? So that's another good milestone, getting maybe all the approvals necessary. All right, cool. So that's great, you guys got that concept. Scheduling is planned activities for performing work and the planned dates for meeting deliverables. Okay, so remember, activities are work items. They need to be performed, but in order to perform them, I have to give them a start and end date, and I have to sequence them. What starts first, second, third. When we do that type of planning or work, we call it a schedule. You have a list of activities or work items with start and end dates. All right, so last thing we'll talk about here before we jump into our practice, I'm going to go back to this other presentation, is what we call a work breakdown structure. I'll talk about that for a couple of minutes and then we'll jump right into our project templates so you guys can start practicing, inshallah, together on your project. So here is what a work breakdown structure looks like. So now you have a lot of work. This project's going to have lots of things that need to get done, but we don't know what they are yet because we're just starting out, right? So the best thing we do is we come up with a vision, a purpose, and a scope statement, an English paragraph that explains what the project is about. And then we break down that into ideas, into many pieces of work. An example that you see here, this project manager was asked to upgrade a classroom, the network for that classroom, right? So it's a training room. This is before the era of Zoom and all these good things. So people go to physical classrooms, sit in front of computers and take a class. And the project manager said, okay, upgrade this classroom from a slow network to a high-speed network. So the project manager said, okay, there's 4 things that probably need to happen for a network upgrade. I need to install things. I need to remove old stuff. I need to test it, and then I'll turn it over to the customer. This project manager doesn't know anything about networks. They're not an engineer, but they know how to break down work. So they do that, and we call this a breakdown. So they're taking the box at the top here that says upgrade and breaking it down into these 4 big items. And then they took this 4th item, turnover to the customer, and they broke it down into 5 items. So I'm going to give the customer a network diagram showing them where all the outlets are and the patch panels and the cables. I'm going to give them a PDF that has a configuration document. I'm going to give them the warranty information, some user guides, and then a checklist where we both accept the work. All right. And then that project manager would take each of these boxes and break them down further into other things. And that's what we call work breakdown structure. And that's how we tackle problems that we don't know much about, right? So learning about project management is a really, really valuable skill, even if you never do project management in your life, because we all have problems. We all have unknowns, right? Your car broke down. Okay, what do I do? I mean, most people say, all right, let me call the mechanic, but this box at the top here could be car broke down, and you can have multiple things here. Call mechanic, try to fix it myself, watch some YouTube videos, whatever it is. So it's a good way to teach you problem solving and taking unknown issues and breaking them down. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us this technique in the Quran. Fir'aun used to use this technique to win over people. How? As Allah tells us in the Quran, he used to divide them into Shia, into groups of people. This is what Shia means. It means groups of people, right? He divides and conquers. Dividing and conquering. So you're taking a problem, which is an unknown project. You're dividing it into pieces of work so that you can conquer each piece successfully and you solve your project puzzle. All right. So this is the last thing we'll talk about today, inshallah. Before we jump into our activity, pause here to see if anyone has any questions. I'll walk you guys through parts of it, and inshallah, I'll let you work together on your project plans. All right. So the first tab is called summary. You typically fill this up at the end when you're done most of the other tabs. The second tab is called the charter. If you remember, the charter is your approval to start your project. So you're going to fill in some of this information. Your name would go here, your project name, your name would go next to it, the start date. This actually can be a smaller one. The problem statement. So here's your project request. Let me, it says here, you're tasked to develop a teen job and opportunities fair. The fair is to be held online on May 30th, 2021, managed by Ilya. The objective of the fair is to provide opportunities for teens to stay away from distractions, things like drugs, excessive gaming, social isolation, social media addiction, trivial hangouts, etc. Some of the objectives you've been asked to consider are employment for these young people, reduce the time spent on social media and gaming, develop a purpose and steer away from substance abuse. So, young people who might not have clear ideas about life yet, you want them to develop some purpose and have some meaning in life so they're not easily swayed into other dangerous things. Promotion of local businesses and organizations. You want to offer these young people opportunities to develop themselves during summer, like classes, employment, camps, and help them build life experience by being involved in their local community. So with your team, put a project plan together, all right? So what you guys are gonna do, inshallah, in the next 20 minutes is focus on this tab, so the charter tab. On the scope tab, you want to fill this one out that says scope statement. So the green field here, that's it. So you're gonna do all of this, everything that's in green here, the scope. And then we're gonna go to the WBS and we're gonna fill out a few of these rows, 10 or 15 or so. And basically you're gonna put main tasks. So remember, this is a different way of presenting your WBS. What I showed you was a block diagram. You can also do it in a spreadsheet where this top row is that same top box. And the rows underneath it, these blue ones, and let me color them blue, are subtasks for that big box. And then you have another green one and you have, subtasks for that one as well and so forth. All right. So that's all we're going to do today. One more thing you can do is in the resource tabs. Remember, we talked about how projects have teams. You're going to put names here and the role and responsibility of that person. So you put 4 or 5 names. All right.